Thank you for joining us for the second part of InboundCon. We now are going to start the panel discussion on enterprise PPC. I'd like to invite each one of the panel members, including the moderator, to introduce themselves.
Start again from the top end of the table.
Thank you. How's it going, everybody? My name is Soucie. I'm the search marketing manager at Demac Media, who's a full-scale e-commerce development web shop. So I don't come from a marketing agency. However, as a development company, we do have a network of sites who we are personally invested in. Because they're e-commerce websites, we get involved in their strategy. So I was brought on board to work on search engine marketing campaigns as a source of driving traffic and revenue to our e-commerce websites. We work typically from medium to large size businesses. Anyone who has a brick and mortar, and has an online presence or is just straight online e-commerce, basically anybody with a catalog of product online is who Demac Media client is.
Hi, I'm Akshaya. I look after digital marketing for Travelocity. It's a fairly new job for me. I've been there for about a year. Before that, I've worked with a bunch of startups just because that's the space that I really enjoy. I feel like I'm contributing a lot more. Travelocity I enjoy because it sounds like a big organization when you see the name on TV and everything, but we do function very much like a small business would. So it's been interesting and challenging.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Yang, and I'm the search evangelist at Bing. And I guess my roles and responsibility is really to act and to build a community of users for our monetization platform, Bing Ads. So I call it our version of AdWords. And I'm really great to be here, or happy to be here.
Great, thanks. And I'm Basu again, your moderator and the president of Powered by Search. I got into PPC 2007-ish, I would say, and my first campaigns were affiliate marketing. We'll talk about that a little bit if you guys are interested in it, but one key takeaway was that I knew it worked when I made $10 for every dollar I spent.
Thank you. Just a quick note. You have access to free internet. You can join the Wi-Fi network CSI member. The Wi-Fi password is 720 innovation with capital letters. Feel free to join it, engage with others who are taking part in the conference by using hashtag InboundCon. Now over to Dev.
Okay, so a couple of housekeeping items before we get started over here. So I was talking to some people during lunch, and they were mentioning that if there's people who are sort of talking to each other during the presentations and the conversations going on, especially at the back of the room, just because of the layout and the acoustics over here, sometimes it filters through and people are taking notes, so be mindful of your peers, basically. The other thing I'd like to open it up to is more audience questions for this session. Some of you might be shy to ask questions, so go ahead and do that online. You can just go ahead to on Twitter and use the hashtag InboundCon to go ahead and ask your questions. I'll be monitoring that over here, and we'll pick up questions that way in addition to audience questions. So whatever you can beat to first, basically. So if you can have questions lined up as we're speaking even on the hashtag InboundCon, I'll take those as they come. So we'll kick this session off with, again, an identification of sort of who our panelists are and where they're coming from in terms of their experience with pay-per-click. So Andrew's the search evangelist for Bing Ads. How many people in the room have used Bing Ads before or heard of Bing Ads? Okay, great. So Andrew's doing a great job. Your job is done. Okay, and then we have Akshaya, who works in-house at Travelocity, doing a lot of sort of high-volume, travel-oriented pay-per-click. And then Brendan, who works sort of across a variety of different e-commerce clients. And with that comes challenges related to everything from, do we advertise for something that has inventory attached to it, for example? How do we track that? There's many thousands of ads probably that Brendan handles for many unique products. So we've got a very good mix of knowledge in the room. Before we get started again, I've already asked you how many enterprises are in the room and how many small businesses are. What I want to ask you is this. Does anybody here not know what pay-per-click is or how pay-per-click works? Show of hands. Okay, 1. Anybody else? 2, 3. All right, so maybe you can talk about sort of.
Sure. So whenever you go out there and do a search, so let's just say you're looking for hotels in Toronto, what you may or may not notice is that there's certain portions of it that are called sponsor links or paid clicks. So that's usually on the top top 3, and then on the right-hand side, we call that right rail. And then you have your sort of organic links in the middle. What pay-per-click does is that it allows you to sort of buy those spots as a function of, number one, how much you pay, and the function of your relevancy to that search. So for example, if I'm a flower shop and I want to buy, for example, the position number 1 for Toronto hotels, I'm not going to show up because flower shops is not relevant at all to Toronto hotels. So that's why you have somebody like Travelocity, extremely relevant, great results, and they've also paid, so the function of results and the payment, they now show up there. So does that really make sense? It's a function of how relevant you are to the keyword. So you go into the machine and say, these are the keywords I want to buy. And then also you put a bid that's attached to them. And through that algorithm, then Google or us, we then go out there and we sort out whether or not you show up first, second, third, or on the right rail. Any questions about that? Yep.
How effective do you find the right rail is? Me? I have to say, when I work in travel, I find that the right rail is a frustrating space just because of the saturation, the number of competitors that you have there, as well as how expensive it's gotten recently to show on, particularly because, I mean, everyone in Canada, every travel agency in Canada anyway, will be looking for the same destinations, will be bidding on the same terms. So it's definitely very expensive. I think it helps that in terms of travel, PPC extends beyond Google and Bing onto meta search sites like TripAdvisor and Kayak and so on, where, you know, if there's a lot of competition in Google, you move onto another platform. I think it's definitely important to be channel agnostic to a certain degree. I think that's how we kind of gain back our efficiencies.
Yeah, I'd probably add that yes, overall, the right rail basically is probably a less effective position to be in. Sometimes, however, there are a couple of key things that happen in PPC. So there's your ad and whether you actually show up, and that affects your visibility. But then there's also how much you pay for that ad. Now imagine if you had a better landing page in position number 4, which is the first position on the right-hand side, and you had a better conversion rate as a result of that landing page, you might actually find it to be more effective to be in number 4 than to be number 1. And a common sort of adage in PPC is that often it does not pay to be the number 1 position simply because you might be buying visibility through, but you might be doing it at a cost that is not appreciable for the business, basically. Too high a cost per lead, for example, too high a cost of customer acquisition. So keep that in mind when you're bidding. It's not always a very black and white type of answer, basically. There are grays as well. Okay, so now that we've covered how PPC works, it works on an auction model, by the way. It's not just about who bids the highest, but it's also about the relevance. We'll be talking about how to make money with PPC. So what are some of the fundamentals, guys, in terms of setting up a PPC campaign so that you're not just spending money and earning clicks, but you're actually able to measure whether those clicks are turning into revenue for a business? And I'll have maybe Brendan talk about this.
Okay, thanks, Dev. So, yeah, typically when you start up a PPC campaign, and the idea you have to think, do I want to have leads sign up, or in this case for this question, the purpose of actually drawing revenue to your site. This is very important for e-commerce websites because the whole functionality of the site at the end of the day is you are selling product and you are acquiring customers. So typically to measure that, there's a lot of testing involved initially. So you're setting up certain campaigns. Typically a lot of our customers will say, let's start with this line of products and this line of keywords, and we'll see how this works. So when you set that up and you start seeing that you're gaining some traffic, a lot of things that you have to do to actually measure whether or not these certain keywords and everything are actually returning money is looking at the data at the end of the day. So like looking up your Google Analytics, or also looking up your back-end systems and tracking all the different keywords there. So basically what you can do afterwards is come back and look at certain campaigns and saying these keywords are driving this amount of traffic but not necessarily making a lot of money. Is it a result of too high of a competition out there? Our actual landing page isn't all that great and we need to improve on that. And then you can look at a saturated list of keywords and seeing we are actually doing very well in these keywords. It's a unique product that we have, or even if it's a highly competitive product, why is that doing much better than your competitors? Maybe because you're offering a better promotion, you had a free shipping on that weekend. You have to look at the actual campaigns that you're running and compare it to the data and seeing at this time, if we launched this campaign in line with this email blast, and this offer was attached to that ad, so also looking at your ad language, that was very successful for us. So this is a campaign that we can keep running, and then we can move on and test new things out. So a lot of the legwork up front is basically testing out different groupings, suggestions, let's use this group of products because these are our most popular ones. Is it an inventory? Are we trying to get rid of this inventory? And if that's not working, then we have to, move on to something else. So basically looking back at the data and what people are doing on your site, but also how they're getting there. So what keywords are they clicking on? Why is this keyword have a lower quality score than this keyword? These are all things that are tracked in these systems like Bing and Google that you can look back and compare. And it's all data that you can also export and break it down and look at and then compare it to your numbers at the end of the day.
So I think that was a great overview about how you track. Now we're going to go kind of like a GMAT exam in some ways. Start off with some basic questions and progressively it'll end up being a little bit tougher or more comprehensive as well. So one of the challenges in running a PPC campaign is figuring out what keywords should I be targeting anyways? Because we understood that PPC works on the basis that you kind of choose what keywords you want to show up for. But how do you know if the keywords you want to show up for are the right ones to begin with? One of the small business challenges that we often see is that by the time you figure out that you've chosen the wrong keywords, you may have spent a lot of money and have no more money to spend to test. So I'm going to pass it over to Andrew and ask him, how do you actually figure out the right keywords to advertise on?
So for me, for anything to do with PPC in general, is I always put myself in the shoes of a customer. So if you take a sample size, take whether your parents, your friends, and ask them, hey, if I'm selling this product, what are you searching for? What keywords are you using to go out there and to look for this product? So for example, it might be t-shirts, vintage t-shirts, et cetera, et cetera. And what you can do is that through these sort of question and answer periods, you can start getting a very good framework or an idea of what keywords they are. And then I think, Brandon, you sort of touched upon this too, is that once you sort of get these keywords, you can go through and do some more research and analysis into them. You can say, well, are these keywords, if you look at sort of the distribution of, usually with most websites, it's sort of call them a normal distribution. But the idea here is that you have head terms, which you have a lot of volume and clicks and everything like that, and you have tail keywords. And understanding sort of, again, where those keywords fall in, what sort of purchasing cycle are they in? Are they in, I just want to find out some more information about it, about your website, or is it I'm actually willing to go out there and buy? And once you do all of that, that is a very good foundation, a very good framework for where you can go out there and begin. And then on top of that too, not trying to plug our products, but we also have keyword expansion builders for you. You can just go out there and type in, say, well, these 10 keywords I think fit in very nicely. What else am I missing? And then literally the algorithm just goes out and spits out, your hundreds of other keywords for you to bid. But I would always say for anything to do, start yourself off as a customer and then sort of take it forward.
Great. Sure.
So I know one of my favorite exercises when I was working at Google as well was just to go to analytics and look at which terms organic visits were being driven by. And then I'd kind of add them on a paid basis depending on how long a visitor stayed on the page after coming through with a certain search term, as well as what the conversion value of that search term was. So basically, if something's working well for you organically, there's no reason why it shouldn't work well for you with paid. And I know that was a strategy that used to work fairly well. And I think another thing to keep in mind as well when you're choosing keywords is that some of them may not directly lead to conversions. So for instance, if I pick a term like, I don't know, vacations to Europe, that's the search term from someone who isn't really sure just yet where in Europe he wants to go, or whether he wants a flight or a hotel. So you wouldn't expect that keyword in itself to necessarily convert, but you would expect that person, if you were to show them a relevant ad, to come back with what we call a shorter tail, or a query that's further down the funnel. So, I guess what I'm saying is, because I have done this in the past, I've kind of dinged a keyword for not directly leading to conversions, and that's not necessarily the fairest way to look at it.
I think that's a very good point. So there are tools out there that will help you, again, spit out the right types of keywords. The two of the most popular ones are now it's called the Google AdWords Keyword Planner. And then you have Bing Ads, which has a tool as well. If any of you are Excel junkies, Bing actually has an Excel add-on that can pull in that data straight into a spreadsheet where you can analyze it. Okay, so now we're talking about conversions, for example. Is there anybody here who does not know what a conversion is? Okay, I'll just go over it very quickly. A conversion can be any type of event that you want to happen as a marketer. So it could be somebody signing up for a form download, for example, downloading something, signing up for a consultation. It could be somebody buying something from you, for example. Any sort of conversion action where you get a step closer from that person being a stranger to being at least known to you in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so conversion tracking is a big deal in pay-per-click because without it, you can't actually figure out which networks are working well for you and which ones aren't, especially in the type of searches where, like Akshaya was mentioning, visitors typically will type in something really broad, like vacations to Europe, and then end up at luxury hotel Salzburg, for example. How do you actually figure out if they are generating conversions from that first keyword and track it all the way down to the point where you can actually know whether they converted and they resulted in a sale?
Well, the system that I use and that I'm most familiar and comfortable using is something called Kenshu, where you can set up an attribution window. So you can say that if someone clicks on one of my terms, then track them for 12 days or 15 days or 45 days, depending on your product lifecycle. And basically say, do they click on one of my keywords after that as well? And do they then convert? So Kensho is it's good for when you're looking at just search. So you're looking at, do they click on a Google keyword? Do they click on a Bing keyword? Do they come back to a Google keyword and convert? Google Analytics, in fact, takes it one step forward. And it says, did someone look at you on social? Did they then come to SEM and did they then convert? So it's a way to look at the funnel across the board.
Another suggestion there, if you're using different software like that can actually measure those different things. If we're thinking in terms of keyword and looking down the actual keyword funnel there and all the different keywords that you have, I know you hate using the term funnel, but the reason why I say it is because when you're bidding on certain keywords, there's basically 3 different types of keywords. There's a broad match, there's a phrase match, and there's an exact match. There's also a broad modified match. I'm not too sure how many people actually do use those. I'm particularly not a fan, but it's just a matter of how you set up your keywords. So if you're using a phrase match, essentially what that is, if I'm using one word, but I want it to show up in many different phrases. So if I'm thinking of a brand, plaid shirts, but it's just plaid I'm looking for, and I put that into a phrase, what you can actually do in your analytics, if you're seeing that the word plaid is getting all these clicks, whether you're looking in your actual account data or you're looking in your analytics, what you can do is actually look at the matched search query, and Google Analytics has this set up where you can actually go in there and check if the word plaid is getting a lot of clicks. You can then further look down and it'll say plaid shirts Toronto, green plaid shirts, and you can see what keywords are driving a certain amount of traffic to your website, and then you can take those apart and maybe split them into their own separate group and play around with it then and test from there as well.
So in terms of match types, does everybody know what the difference for broad, phrase, and exact? Are you using that in your account right now? Show of hands. No? Okay, a few people. So break that down a little bit simpler. When you start bidding on keywords, for example, let's say you're selling scarves, for example. You might be a store that sells just men's scarves, for example. Now, if a woman, types in fall scarves, for example, and you're bidding on the word just scarves, there's a very good chance your ad might show up for that particular term that you bid on. And then if they click on your ad, they've just cost you some money for a product that you don't even carry. So it's very important that you kind of choose the right kinds of keywords and the right way in terms of the context that you're bidding on. That's what broad, phrase, and exact is. Now, in terms of ad copy, guys, search engines are very, very particular about what you can or cannot say in an ad. They have guidelines of what you can do. But more importantly, if you thought Twitter was bad in the sense that you can only have 140 characters on it, search engine ads are worse in the sense that you have to be really succinct about what you want to say and deliver a feature, benefit, and value statement in the space of about 25 characters for the title and 2 more lines that are 35 characters each. That's a toughie because if you're not good at writing, you need to be able to get there and get to a point where you are saying something in a very succinct manner. What are some tips that all 3 of you can offer for people writing ads?
So I'll go out. I'm going to always go back to the consumer or your customer, right? So put yourselves in the shoe of your customer. What would sort of speak to them? If you're doing online retail, you might notice, for example, that a lot of your competitors go out there and offer free shipping. Another idea too is also to check out what your competitors are doing. Look at their ads and say, hey, you know what, this is a great ad copy. Why don't I try to take this portion, which I love to emulate, and then remove and put in what I feel that adds sort of my distinction and my what my sort of my value that I bring to the table. Something else, just to get really, really nitpicky, for those that are in the travel vertical, we've done research on ad copy, and we found that DKI, or dynamic keyword indicators, just really just knock it out of the park for in terms of click-through rates, in terms of ad quality that's there.
Yes, I spent many years writing ad copy for many companies. And while it wasn't always the most fun job, I guess there were certain rules which stood out, which kind of, guaranteed better CTR. One was, like Andrew said, dynamic keyword insertion, where basically, if someone's searching for used shoes, they want to know that your ad is about used shoes, right? So when you put that on the headline straight away, then it definitely helps. I think I'm a bit of a grammar Nazi, but just a couple of things which stood out were if you intercapitalize your headline and your ad copy. I mean, I know it makes no sense. I know it doesn't look particularly, instinctively good, but it seems to work in terms of CTR. And then I think it always helps to have a call to action. I mean, you know that you want people to come to your site and buy or sign up or whatever else, but the user doesn't necessarily. So if you're saying, I don't know, come to our site and sign up, make sure that you call that out in the ad rather than just assuming that they'll get it.
I'm definitely gonna kind of feed off the two answers that you guys get with a little bit extra on top. But the dynamic keyword insertion is a good one. But always make sure that your keywords are present that you're bidding for, and test multiple ads against each other. So don't just write a single ad, shop scarves here, buy now, and then that represents 500 keywords that you have. Try a couple little different ones out and make sure your keywords are present in the different variables using your different call to actions, and see which ones are working versus the other ones. But the biggest thing I would have to say is have your goals in mind. So if you want somebody to complete an action on your site, then you have that relevant in your ad as well. But if you have a brick and mortar retail store, I know I'm a little biased here because I work with mostly retailers and e-commerce websites, you have the option, you can use that ad to leverage traffic into your store as well. And by doing that, you can have a call extension on it or a location extension. So an ad extension is something that I would also utilize. And basically what an ad extension is it takes the limited characters that you have and it builds different things around it. So an example will be site extensions. What that is if you can't insert as many of your keywords that you want, or you're bidding on a certain category, so you're bidding on scarves, but you have men's scarves, ladies scarves, red scarves, green scarves, whichever, you can have your ad copy present, and if you add these site links to it, you get, I think it's 4 now, you used to be able to go, it is up to 6, so you can have 6 different landing pages, 6 different site links present on that same ad. So it helps you take up retail space, but it also allows you to add more relevant keywords if you have such a large list of keywords that essentially Google or Bing are going to highlight when somebody searches for you and show in the ad that this is relevant to your certain keywords. So utilize the different features that out of the box these programs do have and they allow you to expand on.
Great, thanks guys. So now I want to learn a bit more about the challenges that some of you in the audience are facing. I know there's been people in the audience that have spent money on pay-per-click only to walk away like it was a money pit, or that you ran a campaign that you could not get your head around for whatever reason. So our experts over here would love to take some questions related to your PPC challenges when you're setting up a paid search campaign. Go for it.
I've got a question maybe Brandon would be most qualified to answer. In my specific case, we do PPC, but our sites do not have e-commerce, and we need to send someone to intermediaries to ultimately get the sale. Do you have any suggestions on how to drive that in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So how you're saying you're sending it to an intermediary, so sending it to somebody to call sort of thing, or how do you actually complete the sale after somebody?
To go to a retailer or a retailer's website that has e-commerce in order to buy the product.
Okay. The thing that I would suggest right out of the bat is going back to these different ad extensions that you have and making it known on the ad that this is the action that you need to complete. So if you don't have a cart and you can't buy, online right there, or if there's somebody that you need to call, have that call extension in there with the phone number saying this is what you're looking for, phone now for, whichever you need to go. So kind of drive your users that way. Measuring conversions on that could be a little more difficult because now you're just opening it up and it's not being tracked right online. The action's not being completed on your website. So even then, if it's a phone call that you're having with them, ask them, how'd you find the website? And they'll say, Google search, Bing search, that sort of way. And you can kind of compare the metrics that way. But I would make it relevant in the ad using different ad extensions, but also if you're using different location type extensions as well. Like if you're sending traffic into a store, target only that area with a geo-target setting. It's basically in your back-end settings. You can say this area is where I want to send this traffic. An example I have of that is a customer of ours just had outlet sales. So they have a couple of different outlets, and they were only happening in-store. They had a landing page that was if you go in-store to these specific outlets, you'll receive this sale. So what we did was set up different location campaigns and drive people in that specific area into the store, and then the store associates would ask them oh, how did you hear about the sale today? And they'll either say I got a flyer or I did a search for it. That's the best suggestion I can give, right? Because it's a lot more difficult to track, absolutely. But then just having that interaction with your customers and asking them right then and there, how did you find us? And if they say I saw the phone number on Google or Bing, you can attribute that directly back to your listings.
Another nice way to do it is if you give them a specific promo code and get them to use it, because then you know for a fact that it's that ad which drove the user to the site.
You want to go ahead?
Oh, I was going to say, this problem is definitely very common. Big travel, I was working with another travel company, they had this exact same problem too, and it's never an exact number that you might get at. So what they've done is that they just have rules of thumbs, and they say, well, for every person we get to the website, we expect, whatever, some point, blah, 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 turns into an actual conversion, because they not only have bookings online, they also have offline locations too. So maybe exactly what they all mentioned, but then through yourselves, you start building, internal heuristics of if a person comes to my website, that's worth, a quarter of a conversion or a tenth of a conversion. Or if somebody goes to my website and they click on go to this location, that's now worth another extra points of conversion. And you can sort of just do little things like that way just to even get your footing on, how much you're driving in terms of revenue.
And just to add to that, Scott, I know your business at Hasbro, so you heard it here. You heard it here first at InboundCon, but now it's possible to actually look at offline conversion tracking through Google AdWords, and it works based on your Google Click ID. So when you click an ad, for example, and you see there's a little string that says GCLID or ACLK, for example, there's a number in that ad. So you can actually capture that and input that into a promo code. So let's say you're trying to sell some sort of toy, for example, and you say that I'll give you some sort of special if you buy this in store. Then you can actually have that code in some sort of shorter format, basically, printed out for a coupon when you redeem it. If you're using some sort of CRM system, you can actually backtrack that back into AdWords. So check that out, Google AdWords offline conversion tracking. It's very cool. Okay, so we talked a little bit about that. I have a question here from Organic Lifestyle, and the question is, what are some suggestions to improve click-through rate with PPC ads when you have a low quality score on the landing page? Now, does everybody know what a quality score is? Anybody who does not know what a quality score is? Okay, lots of people don't know what quality score is. Brendan, how about you take this one?
So a quality score is basically a metric that the search engines are going to use to compare your ad copy and the keywords you're bidding on to the landing page that you're using. I'm going to backtrack a little into the previous panel on SEO and basically ways to improve quality score, because I've actually done this before where we launched a site and we hadn't really inputted any of the metadata and that we were supposed to or configure the URLs just yet. It was a little premature, I'll admit. It was the early days. But our quality score would be very, very low initially when we were bidding on ads, and our cost per click would go up. So ways that we've improved that is actually with the keywords that we're bidding on and then the landing page pages that we're using, if it's for a specific product page, is making sure that those keywords, in different variations, of course, because you have your head keywords into your long tails, are present somewhere on the page, notably right from the page title itself into the URL and then into the body description, if it's a product description, if it's an information-based page as well. That's how we've approached it, because most of the traffic that we send to would be either a category page or a product page. So it's just optimizing the pages in the areas that matter, where search engines are like visibly going through and crawling your page from the top down. They're checking out all your different links, where they link it to, everything like that. It really does tie into your SEO efforts that you've initially put a lot of legwork into, and then just making sure that the lists that you are generating to bid on really do match up properly with that page. It's the same thing of having very valuable content. Now you're paying for it. You just really want to reduce those costs and drives those up. So try not to get your keywords tangled up by throwing everything into one ad group and having your categories and your brands, yada, 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 in one campaign. Split those keywords up and make sure you're sending the traffic to that page where those keywords are most relevant to.
So just to touch on that, I'm just going to do a Bing plug pretty soon, but just again to touch back on the very simple example of when you're doing a search for Toronto hotels, and let's say you're a Toronto flower shop, and you want to go out there and show up on Toronto hotels. What these networks, or what Bing Ad does and what Google does, is that they have a quality score, a number from 0 to 10, to measure how much of that intent that customer is for searching for, let's say, Toronto hotels, is relevant to your ads. So say, for example, I go out there and I put a Toronto Flowers ad and it shows up in the query Toronto hotels. Let's just say it happened. What will probably happen is that when you run a quality score report, we will give you a number that's quite low. So let's say 1 or 2. And the reason why it's quite low is that because when you look at that number, you look at the other intent of that customer that's looking for Toronto hotels. They're looking for Toronto hotels. They're not looking for they're not looking for flower shops. And then what happens now is that in addition to that sort of quality score of that ad, we also then break it down by landing page. I forgot one of the 3 other things, but we give you more information on what you can do to make your ads very relevant to customers. So the idea here is that the more relevant your ad is to customers, i.e. higher quality score, the more they are going to be going out there and purchasing and converting at the end of the day. But for me, for what I like about quality score, there's a huge debate over quality score, but we have a product called Quality Impact. And what it does is that it just takes a look at your quality score and says, if you fix it, how many more extra impressions are you going to get? So at the end of the day, for me, it boils down back into your ROI in terms of if you're going to put hours into it, you should see an impact into it. So before you go about and think about just tearing everything up all upside down again, do a back of the envelope calculation. See, if you're on Google, for example, I don't think they have that product, but just do a back of the envelope calculation. How many more impressions are you going to get? How many more reviews are you going to get? How many more conversions are you going to get? And if it does make sense for you to sink that hours and times to fix it, then go ahead and fix it. If it doesn't, then maybe you just want to do something else that's quick and dirty to minimize your spend.
So the other big reason why you should care about quality score is because if your quality score is low, then the price that you pay for users clicking on your ad becomes infinitely higher. I mean, if you have a quality score below 4, you can expect to be paying a lot more than you would need to if you were just to have a quality score above 8. So in the long run, I mean, you'd rather be investing that money making your site better rather than paying it per click.
Yeah, so quality score really is about whether you want to market smart or stupid, right? At the end of the day, if you market smart, you take that money and you put it back into improving your ads, the keywords you're bidding on, the landing pages. Ultimately, the goal of quality score is to put bad advertisers in check, essentially, and to get them to start to smarten up. And it's actually a means to be able to level the playing field in PPC. Just like in SEO, for example, it's merit-based, it's earned placements rather than bot placements, for example. Quality score is one of the ways where search engines will try to level the playing field, and so essentially you could take a big spender with lots and lots of budget but not very smart people running their campaign, and a small spender with little budget but very, very smart campaigns, and they could have equal performance essentially because of quality score, because it is an equalizer. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to go over to another audience question. I don't see anything on Twitter right now, so the gentleman over here had a question.
Yes, I'm being asked these two questions from my clients, small business owners, when I'm offering them the pay-per-click as an effective tool. They're asking me that, how do I know actually someone clicked on my ad? And then they ask, I never click on any ad on Google, actually intentionally. Like as soon as I intentionally skip the top and the right and the side, and just pay attention on the first 5, and that's basically how I get this is my habit of searching and clicking.
Okay, so the questions, there's 2 questions. The first one is, how do you know as an advertiser if somebody's actually clicked your ad legitimately? And the second question is, well, or it's rather a sentiment, nobody clicks on ads intentionally. People who do click on ads only do so because they don't know it's an ad. Now, how much of it is truth versus fiction? I'm going to ask Andrew to tackle that.
Well, for the first one, all the publishers, you just run a report. And then that report will give you all that information if they clicked. And if you have sort of proper tracking too, you can see how long they've spent on your website. You know, they've downloaded a recipe page and they printed that out. A second thing, a really simple answer is this is the reason why Google exists, period, right? People are clicking on the ads, people are seeing the results. And if your customer is not clicking the ads, does not mean that nobody else is.
Yeah, I think the one other thing to mention for sure to whoever asked you about that is that I think both Google and Bing are very good about spotting things like click fraud. So for instance, if it turns out to be just your competitor who sits all day long clicking on your ad, then for sure they're going to know that because they keep track of IP addresses and logins and things like that. So whenever a click is fraudulent, they do refund the money and you don't have to pay for that. And they do separate that out in the report as well and say that these are invalid clicks.
And just to finish off, they got pretty much like the main points off. But to your clients, I don't know if you've had this happen with yours, but I've had this happen with my clients when we say, okay, well, what is your traffic like from Google AdWords or Bing ads? And they say, well, I haven't looked in there in months. And it's like, okay, well, there's your problem. That answers your first question. You don't look because as soon as you set it up in your dashboards, they start tracking that. But in order to cross see everything in one place, if you're using Google Analytics, and I'm using Google AdWords and Bing ads, you have to be able to connect everything back into your Google Analytics. So what Google Analytics does for their AdWords is you can actually enable tracking between the two. It's a one-to-one relationship. And then from Bing ads, you can actually build a specific tracking URL that you can bring back into your analytics and check in there as well. But there's a lot of configuration that needs to be done in your accounts before you can start tracking. E-commerce in particular, if it's an e-commerce website, analytics has something that says this is an e-commerce website, so check yes, of course, right? So yeah, to answer that, a lot of the time I've had clients say, I don't even look at my Google AdWords or my Google Analytics, and it's like, well, that answers your first problem.
Okay, we'll take another audience question. Okay.
Google and Bing seem to be working on this do-it-yourself model. Every time it's easier to do your own pay-per-click, why bother paying anybody to do it when we'll even help you and give you the stats? What point does that work for a small business, and what point do you really have to get help?
Okay, so the question, just to summarize, is that both search engines, Google and Bing, have support teams that allow small businesses to get started, get past that first hurdle of starting up a PPC campaign. So you can actually call Bing or call Google at their 800 numbers, and they'll help you set up your first campaign. Now, is that effective for a small business? And if so, let's get some different perspectives on it from the search engines, from agency side, and from in-house.
I was going to say, if for us, I left a bunch of coupons off in the back there with the 1-800. So all I'm just saying, I could tell you it's wonderful and amazing, but just try it out yourself, and that'll probably answer your question from whether or not how the support is. I think your other question was, how do you know when you make that transition? I think that really depends on the company. Is it taking too much time out of running your day-to-day business, or do you find that you want to keep this in-house and that this is such a core competency of your business that you do not want to outsource it out? Does that answer it?
From my experience, when we first started getting into the Google AdWords and when I was first brought on board at Demac Media, a lot of it was do-it-yourself. So the business owners were doing it themselves. They would have somebody on hand that would start. And that's what if you had a very small budget, say $200 a month, just to kind of test things out and work with it. And it hits a certain point, if your $200 is returning $2,000 a month, this is great. So when scaling starts to begin and you're doing the very basic stuff and you're building on top of that, you're getting more comfortable with your budget. In-house is typically, it's a lot easier to manage that, but like Andrew was saying, a lot of the time, a lot of these were the business owners who run it themselves. They have to, fulfill orders, they have to manage the rest of their business, manage stuff that is in store as well. So when you get to a certain point where it's unmanageable and you want to get into more of, the enterprise level type of pay-per-click, if you're into social media ads, retargeting, product listing ads, those kind of things, it may at that point need to either, hire somebody who can come in and do it, hire an agency at that point where it's just too much to manage, because at that point it might get a little more technical as opposed to when you're just doing your initial legwork, like these are the grouping of products we want, we'll start with that. Even in text ads, as your campaigns start to grow out, pending that they do, that's obviously the end goal, if that even starts to grow a little bit and it's a little too much to manage at that point, that's when it happens. It's a growth pain at that point, but initially the first getting set up and start up is very typical. That a lot of our clients have done it, from the large retailers down to the one-store retailer, where they have somebody in-house just saying, yeah, let's do this because Google sent us a $100 coupon, Bing sent us this coupon. So it comes in scale at that point.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some key tips that you need to do on your PPC campaign on a week-to-week basis. Now, PPC is one of those things you cannot set it and forget it, okay? If you do, it'll spell your own ruin because you'll be spending money and not knowing what works. You have to continue working at it so that you can refine the campaigns. Now, these guys over here probably run through lots and lots of different types of campaigns, many different hundreds or thousands of changes that they're actually doing on their campaigns. With the small business account, guys, what are some of the key things that these business owners or agencies that work on client accounts should be doing on a weekly basis to kind of prune their PPC accounts and improve performance?
Oh, that's a tough one. For me, I would say the PPC funnel, there's always a lot of products and always a lot of new listings that are coming out too. So number one, just being aware, just checking out the search engine websites and just seeing what other new products that can go out there and help you. But also at the same time too, before you go out there and implement it from, let's say, from a week-to-week basis, just understanding, again, not losing sight of the end goal of why you've created that. People are so caught up in, this score and that score and this metric, but a lot of times people go out there and they forget what they're doing and they've entered into this, I call it the PPC rabbit hole, and they're just optimizing for the sake of optimizing or doing something for the sake of doing something. So I would say, even at the end of the week, just ask yourselves, are my campaigns doing what I set out to do initially? Is this campaign helping out my business?
Yeah, I think the three things which I pretty much make sure I do every single week is, one, look at how many impressions my keywords are getting. Make sure that all of my keywords are getting impressions, because if they aren't, it could just be that that either that no one is searching for that term at all, in which case I may need to add more variations of that term, or that I'm not bidding enough, in which case, if the keyword is important enough to me, maybe I'll raise the bid. So the first is to check for impressions. The second is to check for click-through rates. So for instance, if I have a keyword and an ad that I think are super relevant to each other, but users are seeing my ad and thinking it's not worth clicking on, then I'd focus on just kind of fine-tuning my ad copy a little. And then I'd work out conversion rate as well. So whether people see my ad, click on my ad, come to my site, and then whether they can actually convert or not. If they don't, then the whole exercise until then has been kind of pointless. So I need to, make sure that that's the right landing page, make sure that that page has everything they need to convert, and basically take it from there.
I would suggest if you're not doing it yourself, if you have an intern, a hire, or an agency doing this, is your weekly performance reportings. So every single Friday, I track the past week and I compare just, the costs and the revenue, just the overall general numbers to make sure that everything is headed in the correct direction. Scaling back and obviously looking at the metrics that my panel folks here are talking about as well, but keeping everything tracked on a weekly basis and making sure if you are working with, a client or an agency, that you're both reviewing that every single week, even if it's a quick glance over. I know it seems like you're wasting a little bit of time doing it, but with these programs, it's as simple as exporting the data, dumping it into a spreadsheet, and saying, this is what we spent, this is what we make. So every single week, we always do these reports being like, okay, this week we spent this is what we made. If you review your campaigns and you see that something starts to slip, and you're working with a specific budget, whether it's a small budget or a large budget, make sure you do budget allocation as well. We do that on a weekly basis as well, because if you're changing something up, especially if it's weekly that frequently, you want to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck at the end of the day. So keeping on top of everything on a weekly basis. Typically I do it at the end of the week. Whenever anybody has the chance to actually go back and look at everything is the best time I find to do it, because Fridays is typically a slower day and on an actual work day. So making sure everything is just on track, and by the end of the month you know, okay, this is how we did on a week over week basis. Then you can set, okay, now for this month, here's the direction we're going to take, or here's the next 6 months that we can actually go and take. Just keeping all the data together in one place on a weekly basis is the best advice that I can give.
Just one more thing, and I remember this from working with a bunch of small clients, is that one thing you definitely want to do every week is look at which search terms your paid ads are getting matched to. Because when you do have broad match keywords in your account, say like nightstand, when I was working with a furniture shop, we found that we were paying a lot for clicks on one nightstand, which we definitely weren't selling, and it wasn't much use to anyone at all, and it was costing us money. So it's definitely a good idea to review and see which terms you're being matched against, and making sure you add those as negatives so that you aren't wasting your money.
Yeah, I just add that on a weekly basis, do that. Look at your negative keywords, because you can prune out stuff that you've paid for that you should not be paying for, irrelevant clicks. On a monthly basis, run at least 4 different types of ads for every single ad group. And what that enables you to do is, out of the 4 ads, they could all just kind of be very similar to each other, but variations. You pick the one that's a loser, and you got 3 ads left, right? At the end of the month. You take the best components of those 3 ads and write a brand new ad. That way, by the time you're done a year, you would have gone through a lot of ad copy that simply does not work. And then at that point of time, you've pruned your account so that you have lots and lots of negative keywords, and you have some really great ads as well. So those 2 things are really important. And the key thing that you're trying to do when you're changing up your ad copy is improving your CTR, or your click-through rate. Click-through rate is divided as, or calculated as the number of clicks you get versus divided by the number of impressions you get. And that's very important, because what you're effectively saying is, if 1,000 people saw my ad, but only 10 clicked on it, shitty ad. Change it. Okay, shitty ad or shitty keyword. So look at both of those and see which one you need to actually change, and you'll be well on your way to a better PPC campaign. Any more audience questions? Yes, at the back.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, in what different situations would you recommend using like CPI, like cost per impression, instead of using like cost per click for an ad?
CPM versus, okay, so the question is, should you be using a bidding model that is cost per click based? Because typically with a search engine like Google or like Bing, you only pay, by the way, when somebody clicks the ad, which is the magic of it. But the truth is, you want them clicking on the ad, because if there's too many impressions, you actually end up having a poor quality score, lo and behold. The other option is to go through the display network, which is basically where you see banner ads, okay? So both Bing and Google have large publisher sites, basically, or a network of sites where you can put up display ads. Which one is better? Let's hear it.
I can go ahead. I personally just like to go with the CPC model entirely, because at the end of the month we always calculate our cost per acquisition. You can do it on a CPM model as well, but I find with the CPC it's a little bit easier to actually calculate that. However, if you're going to switch over to a CPM model, this isn't the best advice if you're just getting started out, but if you are eventually using, a third-party software, going to a lot of these networks, such as an AdRoll, uses CPM models, but they also have account managers and software that can actually break it down and actually calculate certain things and make adjustments so that you do have a good cost per acquisition at the end of the month. So that would probably be the best time to go and do it. But if your general goal is a branding impression as well, like you just want to get it out there and just get visibility, and it's for a short term. You're running, something over the weekend because you just launched a site and you need to just get it out there. by all means go ahead, but I would always just stick to the CPC model because it is easier to calculate that cost per acquisition, unless you've gotten to that point where you're now using a third-party software that has dedicated account managers who are optimizing your campaigns.
Yeah, personally, my favorite thing in the world is CPA, which is where you actually get to pay just for acquisitions, but unfortunately there are very few channels that allow that. Largely they're just affiliates or some meta sites. I think CPM is basically a good metric to have when you're comparing an ad campaign to what you would pay on TV, I guess. That's really the only place where it's an apples to apples comparison. So for instance, if I was buying YouTube ads, then maybe I'd be open to CPM far more than CPC. They don't actually offer CPM, but I'm saying that I'd probably think of that as being the KPI there. Versus CPC, I think pretty much works for everything else.
And I was just going to say CPC because just purely from an economic theory perspective, you actually know how much more your cost to acquire that customer. Then you can, and through that calculation, you can now determine how much easier it is to bid up or to bid down.
I would say CPC as well, but for different reasons. I go back to a user intent-based reason. If you are on a search engine and you are looking for G.I. Joe toys, for example, you're very specific about what you want to find. And as long as you find an ad that actually tells you that I sell G.I. Joe toys at 20% discount or free shipping, I'm going to buy because that's what I was looking for. As opposed to a display ad where I might be going to look for G.I. Joe Retaliation, the new movie that came out. I'm looking for reviews of that movie, and I see a G.I. Joe ad pop up. Well, maybe that's cool, but my intent was not to go buy a G.I. Joe toy at that point in time. So going back to user intent, it's always better, in my opinion, and you always have to look at the numbers and see it. Marketers' answers are always, it depends. But for the most part, it means that you'll have a lower cost of acquisition whenever somebody's actually looking for your products or services, as opposed to when you're showing them a banner when they might be looking for your services, for example. Okay, cool. So we have about 5 minutes left. We have a question over here from Oak and Amarnath, who ask, we use AdWords exclusively. Can you talk about the merits of Bing ads? Why is it worth using considering Google's usage rates?
I've got your back. I got your back on this one. Whatever is working in Google AdWords typically, it's very easy to import into Bing ads. So I absolutely recommend doing it. I'm not just saying it because Andrew from Bing ads is sitting right here. Typically you'll find, obviously most of the search volume is people using Google. You Google it, it's now a dictionary term. But Bing ads, I found when we were testing, comparing to it, anything that was working in our Google AdWords campaigns, the user intent at the end of the day is still the same, whether they're searching on Bing or if they're searching on Google. So we actually found that for the most part, our conversion rates early on were higher on Bing ads because it was a smaller search network or a smaller number of people that were searching for it. So if our conversion rate was 2% on Google AdWords, where a lot more people are searching, there's a lot more competitors there, the conversion rate was maybe 2.53% on Bing ads. So I recommend taking, even if it's just an early on test, take your best campaigns out of Google AdWords and just simply import them with the Bing ads import tool. Again, not just saying it because Andrew's sitting right here. It is absolutely worth looking into because at the end of the day, it is the second largest search network. You're basically just limiting yourself at that point.
Yeah, I think there are three main reasons why I think Bing makes sense. One is that there are, and I forget the exact number, but it's definitely in the single million range, the number of people who use just Bing or Yahoo and who don't use Google at all. So basically, if you don't use them, then you don't get to reach those people at all. The second thing that's interesting about Bing is that the demographic of people who visit Bing is very different from the demographic that visits Google. So you do have, I believe, a slightly older demographic and a demographic with slightly higher household income on Bing. And so that makes it an interesting audience in itself to target. And I think the third reason why I like using Bing along with Google is that it tends to be a little bit cheaper on Bing because there aren't necessarily as many competitors on as many of the same terms.
So I was just going to, for some stats, if those are interested. If you look at query share in the United States, 30%, 7% query share in Canada. In Canada, you're looking around 2.7 million Canadians that don't even use Google at all. And you're also looking at a higher propensity to spend. But again, not trying to plug the coupon, but there's coupons in the back. They look like this. If you're curious, just run it, test it out, see how it is. I mean, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, I would say, you know what, like look long and hard at what kind of product or service that it is that you're marketing. If I was marketing Lexuses, for example, top of line Lexuses, I would put more money into Bing than I would into Google. Why? Because if my market research might show me that the typical Lexus or a Buick buyer, for example, might be from an older demographic. They may have been using computers since 1999 onwards. They use Internet Explorer as their primary browser, which you can find out by looking at your analytics. And guess what browser comes default package with Internet Explorer? I don't know, kind of makes sense, right? Okay, so with that, one more question and we'll wrap up, guys. Mobile. Okay, so mobile is expanding, it's booming in terms of usage, especially on smartphones and also on tablets. What are some key PPC strategies to keep in mind to adapt to the growth of mobile traffic, especially given that I'm sure a lot of you in this room do not have responsive websites right now that kind of adapt in size to your device, for example. A responsive website is simply one where you build one website once and it adapts to your desktop, tablet, and to your mobile devices without having to build an M.dot or a mobile site specifically for that.
So I'm just going to say, just when you're structuring mobile campaigns, we've done research on this at Microsoft, and a very, very simplistic way of looking at it is that the smaller the screen, the less intent somebody's going to buy something, whereas the bigger the screen, somebody will. So if you look at it from a mobile, from a tablet to a PC, so that there's different characteristics. When I'm on a mobile, I'm doing different things than when I'm on a PC. So I would just say is that when you, even before you go down that path, start thinking about what is it that you want your mobile site to do. If it's just for information gathering, is it to point people to, you know, where to hyper-local places. But just keep that in mind in the sense that, you know, the odds of somebody buying a plane ticket on a phone is if it's very small. But again, there's characteristics of a phone that makes it a great advertising platform. You just have to realize how that complements what you are selling.
One thing I would say with the mobile site is to get on your mobile phone and see what your site looks like when you're on your mobile, if it's easy to use or if it's not. If it's not, that's perfectly fine. You could just choose an ad which has a click to call instead of a click to go through to your website, because if you have a better chance of converting someone via the phone than you do via your mobile website, then you're better off paying for them to click and call you versus going to the site and getting frustrated. But that apart, I think mobile advertising is particularly strong, especially for people with physical stores, because it's amazing the kind of potential you have when you know exactly where someone is when they see your ad. So for instance, one of the most fun campaigns I ran was for a particular store in a mall, where we basically targeted the competitor store, and anytime anyone went within a 100-meter radius of that competitor store, we'd pop up an ad saying, "Come over to our store." It was awesome. I mean, that's really kind of the power of mobile, I guess.
And I'll wrap it up fairly quickly here. Dave, you mentioned responsive design. The next panel coming up is user experience, so there's probably going to be some really cool stuff in there. But basically, yeah, if responsive is on your radar, that's something keep your eye on it, because it is going to be big in terms of PPC. What I basically suggest now, and I used to do this, and then what happened is Google released their enhanced campaigns, so you can now actually write out mobile-specific ads, like ads that are fit to show on the mobile. Keep those campaigns separate regardless, even if your ad is going to be a mobile-specific campaign, and then check your analytics too. See what people are visiting on your site, what keywords they're visiting on your site from their mobile tab. But a lot of the time, it may be the same. But writing different campaigns for specific. These people are coming from desktop, these people are coming from mobile. Split it up and then just compare how people are behaving on your mobile campaigns in conjunction with your actual desktop campaigns. And then the ads that you write that are mobile specific, again, spill them over into any platforms that you're using as well, but keep those split up separately as well and have those two different data sheets so that you can compare those at the end of the day.
Great, thank you guys. You've been a very, very captive audience. Next up is skipping the boring bits, UX that makes you money. We all like making money, and we'll talk about landing pages, user experience, and how to create more lovable marketing. Thanks.